So, like most people yesterday, I was watching Twitter every so often, just checking back on potentially what looked like, or well, at least what we thought potentially was going to be the second Russian Civil War. Now, obviously, at the last moment, it seems that Prigozhin, the leader of Wagner, sort of decided to call this off because he managed to negotiate something with with Putin or potentially with the authorities over there. We're not 100% sure what was negotiated. We've only heard unconfirmed rumors. So bear in mind when we get to that, it is very, very much unconfirmed rumors. However, I think I have, to be honest, good enough reasoning to pretty much assure that some of those rumors are probably quite true. But this has been honestly absolutely amazing to watch yesterday. And to be honest, the most funniest reactions came from people who were really pro Russia, who were like, "Oh no, no, no! This is all just fake. This is all just part of Putin's master plan." Yes, he planned for an almost Russian civil war to happen, as if this was some part of, again, 4D chess game. It's the exact same stuff and excuses we saw for all the ridiculous moves that Donald Trump made when he was in the White House. But of course, they were massively coping yesterday. And to be honest, many people like myself were just sitting back and just watching, to be honest, the hilarity unfold. And trust me, we're probably going to end up covering some of the videos that some of those pro-Russia people made because they are funny. Because they have gone diving deep into coping territory to try and get some rationale to how actually all this that was going on was actually a good thing. But before we go getting into sort of this potential Russian civil war that almost happened yesterday and then didn't, we need to go over the Wagner group because we need to go who they are, what they are, because it'll again give you some more background info as to what went on and why eventually they turned around, or at least what negotiation status they've taken, and you'll understand a bit more. But before we do get into that, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a notification link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And of course, as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel that way. There is, of course, the YouTube thank you button, and there is the Pony Club down below as well. So, for those of you who don't know who Wagner is, essentially, Wagner is a mercenary group that has very strong ties to the Kremlin and acts sort of almost as a second army. And Wagner, traditionally, they've been around for quite a while, normally have participated in a lot of Africa. That is the main area that they sort of tend to operate in. They've operated in Syria, but mainly in Africa. And they have, well, put it this way, there's an entire Wikipedia page of all the war crimes that Wagner have committed over there in Africa. We don't need to go over that now, but needless to say, it is a very long, long list. The other thing that they've also done a lot in Africa is they've done a lot of looting, and they've gotten away with this partly because they have actually received proper training. They actually have proper equipment. Wagner actually has an Air Force arm of it. So when it's going up against these, African warlords or these African militias, they don't have anti-air support to take down these Russian-made jets. They don't have equipment to fight back against some of these the Russian tanks or the armored vehicles. So in Africa, for them, it's complete child's play. And then the rewards are far, far greater because they've looted gold mines, diamond mines, they've taken these places over permanently. They've done all sorts of stuff over there and profited massively because of it. So that's why in Russia there is a massive problem with what they call brain drain. And you see this of the actual sort of intelligent Russians. They go to university and then they leave Russia because they can get paid far, far more for a job in Germany, France, wherever than they can ever achieve in Russia. And it's the same for Wagner. Wagner has a massive pull factor for anyone who was actually serving in the Russian military because you get paid more in Wagner. And of course, the looting opportunities are even more incredibly lucrative on top of your pay. So Wagner pulls away any of the actual capable military soldiers that the Russian army actually had. And of course, Wagner actually trained them. So compared to your standard Russian infantrymen, the Wagner soldiers are a lot more better trained. So that has been the current situation. But what has been happening? Why did this end up with them revolting in this style, completely mutinying against Putin? Well, the first thing is, if you know, Prigozhin, Yevgeny Prigozhin, who's the leader of Wagner, has been for the past couple of weeks been really, really angry at the Russian military defense. And he has been angry because they have not been supplying his forces with ammunition, supplies, and he has been absolutely outraged. He has been constantly on this. Now, it's worth pointing out, even when he was in, mid mutiny, he was explicitly saying he was not going after Putin, but he was going after what his the advisors that were around Putin. He was basically making the case of, oh yes, I'm rebelling, but I'm not rebelling against the status quo. I'm just rebelling against the fact that these advisors that are advising Putin aren't, shall we say, doing their job right. That's who he went after. But there are a lot of people who, in the pro Wagner groups that we saw on Twitter, from the Telegram channels that we were seeing in the chats, that we were seeing sort of people translate. They were like egging this on, saying, "Yes, it's finally time. Putin needs to be toppled." And there were a lot of, from we saw from the Russian military sphere, actual normal Russian troops supporting Wagner because they also saw the military defense as the enemy. And we've seen videos of this going back weeks and months at the start of this. And it even goes back to the Second World War, where you had the German infantry being in, lacking supplies, all kinds of stuff going on. And their saying was, oh, if only the Fuhrer knew, as if, he could sort this out. And we've seen videos of Russian troops sending messages trying to get the attention of Vladimir Putin, as if he would learn about this and he would just solve all these problems. And eventually, this has come to a head because the Wagner forces were going to get assimilated into the main Russian military, meaning that Prigozhin would lose power, meaning that he would have to take orders from, well, these bureaucrats that he hates. And that's why he seems to have revolted, because he wanted his little special status. And they rolled forward, these negotiations took place, and essentially he's got what he's wanted. Wagner is still going to be an independent organization, but more interestingly, as a lot of people aren't really reporting about, in this other thing that he negotiated, he said that now Wagner is going to leave the lines in Ukraine and return to Africa. That all his forces are going to now redeploy back to Africa. Why? Because if you look at the Ukraine at the moment, they are not fighting against your African militia that aren't very well trained, don't have the supplies, logistics, etc. They're fighting against this very now highly well trained, highly equipped Ukrainian military force that they cannot bully. And then once they go in there, basically send in their looting squads and start looting everything. Mariupol is a classic example of that. The big steel plant that happened there, when they finally took the city, the Wagner vulture squads basically swept in and into this massive steel plant. Anything that was damaged went to scrap, and they sold it on as scrap. And any useful equipment that was still working, or at least could be repaired back into working condition, was then sold on to Russian steel plants. That's how Wagner operate. They go in and then they loot the place. They have not been able to do that because they are now actually fighting against a very decently well-equipped, far superior force. And they do not like that. They do not like that they have to fight that. But this is a massive win for Ukraine, because not only now are they losing those as probably the best trained troops that Russia has, because they're now going back to redeploying back to Africa, but also this makes Putin look so weak. There were rumors going around that Putin had fled Moscow. Now, we don't know whether that was true or not, but if he did, that makes him look incredibly weak. And the fact that Putin basically rolled over and gave Prigozhin everything he wanted. This makes him look weak. Not only that, but there are many people in, like, what we saw from the translated telegrams, that were so annoyed that Wagner did not go the distance. So there is now also a potential that the Russian military, who are already massively demoralized, massively under a lot of pressure, more than they'd ever really faced before, what now happens to them? They seem to have gotten even more demoralized. And this a whole thing makes Putin look absolutely weak. Where he goes from here, who knows? But this, even though this second civil war did not go the distance, it absolutely affects and hurts Russia. It makes Putin look weak. And even the idea that Yevgeny Prigozhin came out after and said, "Oh yes, it was completely bloodless." No, they shot down I think a couple of helicopters and planes as well, and jets, military jets. So Russia lost 12 pilots that they cannot replace easily. And there's even bigger questions of, can they actually replace those losses of the helicopters and the jets that Wagner shot down? And remember, Wagner aren't being punished for this. They're being actively rewarded. So this does not work in Putin's favor, because, again, it makes him look weak. It makes him look like he gave in. And that will have probably further repercussions down the line. And ultimately, this works in Ukraine's favor, because now all those Wagner troops that are on the front lines in Ukraine get moved out. They get moved back to Africa. Basically, Russia loses its best trained troops currently on the line. And ultimately, that means Russia probably having to get more of those conscripts and throwing them into the gaps. And if you've seen a lot of the videos recently coming out from these counteroffensives, yeah, the Russian forces have not been performing well. Partly because they are throwing untrained troops. Here's a rifle, go sit in the trench. And if the Ukrainians come towards you, just hope for the best. So this only works in Ukraine's favor, but this was just, I think, probably one of the bizarrest chapters of this entire, um, the Russian invasion of Ukraine so far. It is wild. This happened, but at the end of the day, this has made Putin look incredibly weak. And there's still potentially that, well, Belarus, it didn't look good that, oh yes, their leader seemed to do a runner to Turkey. Now he just said, "Oh, I'm just going on holiday," but it doesn't look good that he just happened to flee at that exact moment. So we'll see what happens there. But ultimately, yeah, this was not a good day for Putin, and I think this will have further ramifications down the line for Russia and even for Putin. So, yeah, we'll see what happens there. But anyway, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.